JJ Ma. That's Sanskrit for I honor the Divine Mother, the Divine Feminine, the Goddess. Today, there's an urgent need for the female voice. The issues in our world are complex. We simply cannot address all of these issues if we are not working together. Think of the damage to our workplaces, our communities, our world, when the female voice is missing at the tables of leadership. Imagine instead the impact of women and men each coming to the table fully empowered and confident, contributing their voice. I used to feel that my voice didn't matter. I grew up, probably like many of you, in a male-dominated and masculine-oriented family culture, not to mention the patriarchal culture we all grew up in. As a girl, I felt that who I was by nature was second best to men and boys. I carried around a feeling of less than, and I worked very hard to remedy this feeling. In school, I was a straight-A student, although admittedly, when I got here to St. Mark's, it was a bit harder, so I did have some B's. I played varsity sports, field hockey, lacrosse, basketball. I sang in the school choir and the all-girls singing group. I was a library prefect. I was an editor on the yearbook, and I was what I considered to be socially popular. At least popular enough, I had friends. While doing all of these things seemed to band-aid my less than feeling for many years, and in fact, gave me great self-confidence, which I'll point out, by the way, is different than self-esteem and self-worth. Eventually, this wasn't enough. Eventually, the bottom dropped out. First, I developed chronic aches and pains in my body, which was a bit bizarre for a healthy young woman. And next, I developed a string of violent physical illnesses while I was living overseas that had me down on my knees, wondering if I indeed was going to make it out alive. And in one of these circumstances, I actually wrote my mom a farewell note. But I survived, obviously. I'm here. So what did I do? What I did is I chose to listen. I chose to listen to a voice inside of me that had long been silenced. And it was through this listening that I began my way back home to the voice of the feminine, to a spiritual focus and orientation to feminine energy, feminine wisdom, and feminine power, where women were by nature leaders and never second best to men. In 2007, I started a clothing line based on the goddess. It was a yoga clothing line. I was a yoga teacher and a yoga student, and I'd been in the yoga community for many years. The shirts all had images of goddesses on them from the Hindu and Tibetan traditions. And the intention of the clothing line was to help women awaken to their potential, and more specifically, to help women remember themselves as goddesses, as women of wisdom, dignity, and power. In the yoga community, I felt completely safe expressing my passion for feminine spirituality. It was understood there. At least there was a welcome curiosity to it. A few years later, I was given the opportunity to bring my work more mainstream. I was awarded a press fellowship from the United Nations Foundation to be a reporter at the UN during the annual General Assembly, which, by the way, just happened this past week in New York. This is a time when the world leaders gather in New York for debate and policy making. So this was huge. This was a big deal for me. I was going to get to be meeting with world leaders and political dignitaries, bringing my feminine perspective and my feminine voice to the conversation. Awesome. However, when I got to New York, I noticed something happen. I noticed a shift and a change in my behavior. I noticed that I actually started to dampen and mute my voice. I felt like if I actually expressed my feminine perspective and my authentic voice, that I might actually lose my credibility. I mean, what would all these leaders think? Mostly male, by the way. What would all these leaders think about me talking about feminine spirituality and how I saw that as the missing link to advancing women's leadership? So I hid my authentic voice, tucked her away, and I conformed to what I thought a woman reporter should be like in society, which basically meant not really talking about what I wanted to be talking about. And I'm betting that there are some of you here today who have done that same thing. You've shut off your voice and you've conformed to what society expects of you or what you think society expects of you, rather than being true to you. And I get that, right? It can feel easier to conform. It can feel safer. Over the years, women have been persecuted for sharing their true beliefs and their perspective, their values. Look at our history. Women have been burned at the stake, stoned to death, raped and murdered for speaking their truth. While witch burnings don't happen today, stonings do, and so do rape and death threats. How many of you here today are familiar with Gamergate? A few? Okay, not many. So for those who are not, which is a lot of you here, last year, a small group of women in the gaming industry received rape and death threats for using their voice to speak out about sexism and misogyny in video game culture. They were speaking out on things such as the abuse of women in video games, the hypersexualization of female characters, and the harassment of women within the gaming industry. Things that would seem natural to speak out about, right? The backlash was violent. It started on social media, and then it moved into the real world. Anita Sarkeesian was one of these women. Last year, when Anita was scheduled to speak at Utah State University, the university received a terror threat from someone claiming that they were going to commit the deadliest school shooting in American history if Anita lectured. For safety reasons, Anita canceled her appearance. And later, she was forced to flee her home when her home address was posted online alongside the rape and death threats. So you see, there is a legitimate reason why many women have a fear of speaking up. This fear operates at a deep level in every woman, whether she can give words to it or not. In my case, for a very long time, I was terrified to come fully forward in my leadership, sharing my voice, especially with the goddess at the forefront of my work. I was scared about what people might think of me. I was scared my life might be threatened, like the women I just spoke about. And I was actually scared that I might be carted off to the loony bin. Seriously. So I kept myself small, hidden. I felt safer, easier. And in truth, many times, it still does. However, I know that I have a big calling inside of me, and it is through being visible in my leadership and using my voice that I will be able to affect the most change. And I'm betting that there are a good number of you here today who have those same feelings inside of you. You know the pain of being silenced, and you especially know the pain of silencing yourself. Now, the problem with this, the problem with staying silent, is that when women's voices are missing at the tables of leadership, the truth of our lives are also missing. Law and public policy, therefore, never reflect the truth of our lives, and therefore never reflect the totality of the population. So how can we as a nation and as a world thrive in this way? I don't think we can. We know now from study after study that when women are in leadership, communities and workplaces are more innovative, profitable, and successful. We also know that when women earn money, a high percentage of that goes back into the family for medicine, nutrition, and housing. And consequently, the children are healthier. Get this. In a global study, it has been shown that for every dollar a woman earns, she invests 80 cents back into her family. Men, on the other hand, invest around 30 cents back into the family and are more likely to squander the money on alcohol and other vices. Now, sorry guys, I know this probably doesn't apply to most of you here in the room, but this is the worldwide data. And this is not to say that men aren't working hard to provide for their families. Of course they are. Of course you are. What it is saying is that gender balance makes better decision making, more inclusive, humane, and compassionate decisions. Question for the women in the room, for the women and girls in the room. How many of you have been in a meeting in the workplace or the classroom where you didn't say what you really wanted to say or what you felt like saying because the room was dominated by men? Okay, wow, okay. Yeah, there's some, all right, I get it, all right? I've been there. I get that. Question for the men and boys in the room. How many of you have been in a meeting in the workplace or the classroom where you intentionally tried to silence the voices of the women? Okay. I don't know. Yeah, hopefully there's not anyone out there. And I believe you. Because it is often unintentional when men silence women. You see, there's a cultural gravitation to the male voice because there's an unexamined assumption that men have always held power and authority in society. But this is simply not true. There's a 25,000-year history of female leadership that predates patriarchy, where the goddess was worshipped by women and men alike. When a woman learns about the goddess, she discovers that she doesn't need permission to rise in her leadership. She is leadership. When a woman learns about the goddess, she sees the goodness of her female body and begins to honor it as sacred. When a woman learns about the goddess, she begins to heal the deep wound within her that tells her she is unworthy. She begins to see that she needs no one's permission. She needs no gatekeeper to let her in. She is in. She is. I define leadership as something that is innate in every woman, and not so much something that needs to be learned as it needs to be remembered. Women, girls, I want you to walk away from today knowing that your voice matters. It not only matters, there's an urgent need for it. You have a unique wisdom in you that the world needs to be whole. When you don't stand up and speak up for what you believe in, you suffer, as you well know, and the world suffers along with you. The time is now to speak your truth. Today, I want to challenge you to start speaking up more with your authentic voice. This week, when you're in an environment where you don't typically speak up this once and see what happens. And no matter what the results, you've already won because you've honored yourself. Men and boys, I want you to walk away from today knowing that you also carry the feminine within you. This gives you access to your intuition, helps you become more compassionate, better husbands, better fathers, better teachers, better leaders. Think of the women in your life who you love. Consider what it would mean to them to have their voice heard, their authentic voice. I want to challenge you this week when you're in a meeting, either in the workplace or in the classroom, to allow more space for the voices of the women in the room and see what happens. While these may sound like small actions, I promise you that small actions lead to large social change. JJ Ma, I honor the feminine, the masculine. I honor each and every one of you. Thank you.